The 2014 World Cup to this day remains to be one of the most iconic editions of the tournament in its history. It had everything from major upsets to Cinderella stories to breakout stars that are still referenced to this day, and had a ton of heartbreak moments that most football fans will never forget. However, that one sentence explanation doesn't do the tournament justice on how truly amazing and legendary it was. So today, let's relive some of the iconic 2014 World Cup moments that show why this World Cup will never be forgotten. So the first reason why the 2014 World Cup is still seen as so iconic is the fact that it was hosted in Brazil. You know, the football capital of the world, some would say. After all, any football fan would know this, but Brazilians are some of the biggest lovers of the beautiful game. Their national team has literally won 5 World Cups, the most out of any national team in the world. And they've had some of the best footballers to ever play the sport like Ronaldinho, Zico, Romario, Rivaldo, Kaká, R9, Neymar, my idolo, and of course, debatably the best Brazilian footballer ever, Pelé. And additionally, according to Statistica in a January 2020 survey that they took, approximately 46% of the Brazilian population identified as fans or huge fans of football, which means that almost half the population or 212 million people love the sport. And that same survey also found out that Brazil was the sport with the largest fan base in Brazil, and only 2 out of the 10 respondents expressed no interest in the sport at all. Plus, with the passion for football in the country being so deep, the country is often referred to as O País do Futebol, which translates in English to the country of football. When your country has a nickname like that, I feel like it's only right that you can call yourself the capital or the home of football. But it's not just the fact that Brazilians are in love with the beautiful game, it's the fact that Brazil were heading into the 2014 World Cup on a high. You see, leading up to the tournament, one of the greatest footballers to ever play the game, who once had the potential of being even greater than Messi and Ronaldo, Neymar, was entering his first World Cup, and at 21 years old, he was already the face of the national team. Not only that, remember that Spain team that dominated the early 2010s, where they won 3 tournaments in a row, the 2008 Euros, the 2010 World Cup, and then the 2012 Euros? Well, Neymar led Brazil to absolutely destroy that very same Spain team in the Confederations Cup final in 2013, where Brazil beat Spain 3-0 with Neymar being the star player of the country. So, with Brazil heading into the tournament on a high, with one of the best players in the game leading the way, and at the same time being the host, Brazil as a whole is definitely one of the reasons why this tournament has become so iconic. However, speaking of Brazil's performance at the World Cup, things happened that football fans are never gonna forget, and I'm not really just talking about in a good way. But in retrospect, what happened to Brazil at the World Cup is why so many people remember the tournament so well, even more than 10 years later. The opening game of the World Cup started off rough for the Brazilians, with Marcelo scoring an own goal to give Croatia an unexpected 1-0 lead. But thanks to the Brazilians of Neymar, who scored a ridiculous outside the box goal with his weak foot to equalize the game, and then scoring a penalty, and Oscar scoring one in injury time, Brazil would start the tournament in winning ways by securing a 3-1 victory. The next game though, due to an Ochoa masterclass from Mexico, Brazil would draw to the North American country 0-0. But against Cameroon in the last group stage game, Brazil would be so dominant and win 4-1, with Neymar scoring a brace and getting 4 goals in 3 games. However, the round 16 tie against Chile would be a little bit tricky, with this Chile side being the same generation who essentially knocked out Spain, which we'll get to later, and the same generation of players who went on to win 2 Copa Americas back-to-back in 2015 and 2016. But after drawing 1-1 in 120 minutes, Brazil will win the penalty shootout, with Neymar scoring the decisive penalty, and they would make the quarterfinals. But after this is when bad things started happening to this football nation, and the reasons why this tournament was going to be remembered forever. In the quarterfinal game against Cinderella story side Colombia, which we'll talk about later, Brazil would end up winning 2-1 thanks to a goal from Thiago Silva in the 7th minute, and then David Luiz scoring an outrageous free kick in the 69th minute with his iconic screaming and running celebration. And like I said, even with James Rodriguez scoring one back to make it 2-1, it wasn't enough and Brazil would make the semifinals. However, not without taking a couple of hits. First, the captain Thiago Silva would get booked with a yellow card in the 64th minute, and due to yellow card accumulation, he was suspended for the semifinal showdown against Germany. Second, the 21-year-old star boy Neymar, who was carrying this nation at the World Cup, got injured by Zuniga. And please bro, don't cancel me for saying that, that's dead ass his name. After he rammed Neymar's back with his knee, which broke a bone in his back. Pause. And this kept Neymar out for the rest of the tournament and kept him on a wheelchair for weeks, even releasing a video telling the Brazilian fans that he's in pain but to still root for the team, etc. The scary part is that if the Colombian defender kneed Neymar just 2 centimeters lower in his back, he would be unable to walk, let alone play football again. I'm grateful that Neymar ended up recovering, because not being able to see the beauty in his footballing ability throughout the following years would have been so depressing. Yeah, I'm a Neymar glazer, deal with it. Anyways, without Neymar and Thiago Silva in the semifinals, Brazil were depleted, but with them being the host nation and still a decent side without them, they were still expected to challenge a very relentless and strong Germany side. But 11 minutes into the game from a corner kick, Thomas Müller was wide open and simply kicked the ball in to give Germany an early 1-0 lead. Then 12 minutes later in the 23rd minute, Thomas Müller leaves the ball off perfectly for Klose, who gets his goal after scoring from a rebound to make that his 16th World Cup goal to make it 2-0, becoming the #1 goal scorer in the competition in World Cup history. But it gets so much worse, because 1 minute later in the 24th minute, Toni Kroos hits a half volley with his weak foot into the back of the net to make it 3-0. Then 2 minutes after that in the 26th minute, Toni Kroos wins the ball back and receives the ball right in front of the net from Khedira to make it 4-0. And then 3 minutes after that in the 29th minute, Khedira finally gets one of his own to make it 5-0. Yeah, in the first 30 minutes of a World Cup semifinal, Germany was beating Brazil 5-0. Not only that, Germany scored 4 goals in 6 to 7 minutes in the semifinal of the world's biggest competition, when almost everybody in the world was watching. As you can see, this game right here is iconic and forever etched in history, but not for the right reasons. Well, if you're a Brazilian fan, it's not for the right reasons, because for Germany, I bet they didn't care at all. This game was so crazy that even my parents asked me to put on a replay of the game so they can watch it too. My parents don't really care about football, bro. That's how huge the destruction of Brazil news was. Even that Brazilian kid crying is still used in memes today. But of course, the game didn't end yet. Schürrle came off the bench and scored 2 goals of his own in the second half to make it 7-0. And then Oscar got that late goal to soften the blow by a very tiny margin to help end this depressing game for Brazil 7-1. And to this day, that scoreline is still traumatic for Brazilian fans. I remember when I was in Austria a couple of years ago, I ran into an older Brazilian woman, and she told me she remembers exactly where she was when that game was taking place. That's crazy. That's how traumatic this game was for them. But for the right and wrong reasons, Brazil was an enormous and iconic part of the 2014 World Cup, and the country on its own for on and off the pitch reasons was an essential piece to why the 2014 World Cup is still remembered very well today. But now it's time to go over one of the other reasons on why the 2014 World Cup is still so iconic. And yes, of course, all of the Colombian national team was a part of it with their unique and emblematic goal celebrations, but one man was the face of it all for keeping it real, and that was James Rodriguez. But just like how he switched from Brazil to Colombia just now, you can do that too technically, with Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video. You see, the Surfshark VPN has more than 3,000 servers in over 100 countries, which means you can connect to almost any region of the world if you just wanted to check out their Netflix exclusives, for example. Because sometimes I swear that Netflix in the US is lacking. So like I said, you can literally go from Brazil servers to Colombia servers as fast as just a click. Additionally, with Surfshark, you can browse the dangerous and weird places we all know as the internet and privacy, with Surfshark encrypting internet traffic to mask your IP address and prevent tracking from the other evil entities out there in the world. Or let's just say you were in Brazil on vacation, for example. With Surfshark, you could connect to the US servers and watch your favorite American channels or shows, like watching the CBS Champions League Crew, which is just hilarious but only available in America. And this is just a scratch at the surface. With using a VPN like Surfshark, you can find better deals by connecting to different servers in different countries, find cheaper flight tickets, which I know all of us want with us flying around the country for the 2026 World Cup, or streaming football matches as we all do. Surfshark could help with that. So if this interests you, go to surfshark.com/NabutoVPN or use the code NabutoVPN at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. That's right, you heard me correctly, bro. 4 extra months. And let's just say after getting it, you don't like Surfshark for some reason. Well, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, just in case the VPN is not your thing, even though it probably will be, trust. So once again, go to surfshark.com/VPN or use the code NabutoVPN at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Anyways, thank you Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and now let's get back to Colombia. So you see, Colombia were heading into the World Cup in a displeased way, with the superstar for Colombia and arguably a top 3 striker in the world at the time, Radamel Falcao, being ruled out of the World Cup due to a torn ACL in his left knee back in January of that World Cup year, which meant he was unable to regain match fitness in time for the tournament, thus ruling him out. So there wasn't too much hope for Colombia to go far at the tournament without missing their superstar. But luckily for Colombia, James Rodriguez came out of nowhere and showed up big time. The 22-year-old Monaco attacking midfielder at the time headed into the tournament as Colombia's unknown number 10 for the most part. But right away in Colombia's first game of the 2014 World Cup against Greece, they was steamrolled past Greece 3-0, with James' corner kick playing a crucial part in Colombia's second goal of the game, and then scoring from their third right inside the box, perfectly placing the ball to the bottom left-hand corner to get his first goal of this 2014 edition. It gets even better for James though, because in the second game of the group stage against Ivory Coast, after dominating the better chances for the first 60 minutes of the game, but just being unable to score, James Rodriguez would clutch up for his nation in the 64th minute, scoring from a header from a corner kick to put Colombia up 1-0 crucially to send his country through to the knockout round. And even though Ivory Coast scored 1 goal later in the match, Colombia scored another goal shortly after James' goal. A goal where, by the way, James won the ball back for them to score, just FYI. But this also meant that they won 2-1 and made it through. However, the top of the group was still undecided, so Colombia desperately wanted to get the win against Japan in their last group stage game. And they did just that, largely thanks to, of course, the rising star at the time, James Rodriguez. Now in the first half, Colombia would win a penalty, in which Cuadrado would convert it to make it 1-0 to Colombia. However, in added time in the first half, the ex-Leicester City striker that would win the Premier League 2 years later, Shinji Okazaki, would somehow score an outrageous header that was crossed behind him to level up the tie. But then in the second half, James Rodriguez stole the show, as he often did at the World Cup. First, in the 55th minute, James Rodriguez would lay off the ball perfectly to the striker Jackson Martinez, the man who dipped his potential to collect the bag in China, and he scored to restore the lead for Colombia. Moving on to the 82nd minute, James Rodriguez would lay through a perfect ball to Jackson Martinez, where he proceeded to cut inside to score to make it 3-1 for Colombia. And this also meant that James Rodriguez would get 2 assists in this game. But the show didn't stop here, because in the 90th minute, James Rodriguez would dance with the ball, leaving Yoshida inside out and dropping him to the ground, and chip the goalkeeper after that to make it 4-1 to Colombia. And this made sure James Rodriguez finished the game with a goal and 2 assists, meaning he played a crucial role in 3 out of the 4 games that Colombia scored on that day. That is crazy. Yoshida is never going to forget this moment, especially because that goal is still being relived upon on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, etc. to this day. But now it was time for the serious round, the knockout stages, where Colombia were set to face a familiar foe, and the Colombo opponent Uruguay, who finished second in their group due to Costa Rica finishing above them, a side we'll talk about in a bit. Luckily for Colombia though, Uruguay star man Luis Suarez would be suspended for this match for biting Chiellini's shoulder in their match against Italy, and this advantage would prove pivotal for James and his Colombian teammates. Most of the first half though, both of the sides were feeling each other out, and it was just really physical, with a bunch of challenges flying in from left and right. However, there soon would be a James Rodriguez masterclass, because in the 28th minute, James Rodriguez will receive the ball on his chest, in which he controls it beautifully, turns around swiftly, and slams the ball on the underside of the crossbar, and the ball goes in to put Colombia up ahead against Uruguay 1-0. This goal to this day is one of the greatest goals of World Cup history, and is remembered fondly upon from football fans all across the world, unless you're a Uruguayan fan of course. And this goal was so special that it even later went on to win the 2014 Puskás Award, which meant that FIFA decided, given the technique, circumstance, etc., that this goal was the best goal scored in 2014. That's how magical and special this James Rodriguez goal against Uruguay was. But the story wasn't over for this game, because in the second half, James Rodriguez was waiting in the box for a Cuadrado header cutback, which happened, and he tapped the ball in to make it 2-0 to Colombia, and that would be the final score of this game, which meant that James Rodriguez carried his nation of Colombia to the quarterfinals of the World Cup for the first time in their history, something the great Valderrama couldn't even do, and they did all of that without their superstar up top, Radamel Falcao, at the 2014 World Cup, which just comes to show how special James Rodriguez was at this tournament. Then in the quarterfinals against Brazil, although Colombia lost 2-1, as I already mentioned in the previous section, James Rodriguez would get a goal in this game through a penalty in the 80th minute, but it wasn't enough to carry his nation of Colombia onwards, and James could not control his tears back at the end of the game. But even Brazilians recognized his excellence throughout the tournament, that they try to shower him with respect and love, with even David Luiz comforting him post-game. But with James Rodriguez managing to get 6 goals and 2 assists in 5 games at the World Cup, he ended up winning the World Cup 2014 Golden Boot as not even a striker, but as an attacking midfielder. But not only that, this performance secured him a dream big money move to Real Madrid, where he spent numerous years at and won the Champions League at. Overall though, the World Cup is often remembered as a James Rodriguez show, and it does help that he's hella handsome, pause, and all the girls were and still are fangirling over him. But regardless, the streets will never forget this James Rodriguez and Colombia performance. Speaking about never forgetting performances, we gotta talk about the major upset that happened to the Spain national team at the 2014 World Cup. But before we talk about this one, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it and it means a lot, so thank you. And also if you guys can, follow my Twitter and my Instagram, both on Debuto, if you just want to hear my thoughts on football games, transfers, and overall just to get to know me more. And also make sure to join the Discord server, link in the description, and also follow me on Twitch. Live streams may be coming soon. So if you want to, feel free to hit me up with that follow. Thank you. Back to topic, if you're a football fan, you're all probably aware of the World Cup curse, where the country who wins the World Cup supposedly gets grouped at the next edition of the tournament. Now it's not a guarantee, as we saw with France most recently where they won the 2018 World Cup, but instead of getting grouped, they went on to the final of the 2022 World Cup. But this quote-unquote curse has occurred multiple times in the past. For example, France won their first ever World Cup in their home country in 1998, where they dunked on R9's Brazil 3-0 in the final. But at the 2002 World Cup, they failed to progress in the group stages, even going out without scoring a single goal. Then in 2006, Italy won their 4th ever World Cup in Germany. However, in 2010, they were eliminated in the group stages as well, continuing the trend. Even after the 2014 World Cup, where Germany won this edition of the competition, they failed to progress in the group stages at the 2018 World Cup after losing to South Korea on the last match day. However, what felt different regarding the 2014 World Cup after the 2010 edition was that Spain was simply just built different, or so we thought. This national team was creme de la creme. This is the same national team that went on to win the 2008 Euros, snapping their trophy drought of 44 years, won the 2010 World Cup, becoming the world champions for the first time ever, then winning the 2012 Euros, destroying Italy 4-0 in the final, becoming the first national team in history to win 3 consecutive major international competitions. And they did so by showcasing the revolutionary tactical approach known as tiki-taka, which is a game plan characterized and revolved around intricate possession-based play, along with having a remarkable defensive record, not conceding a goal in the knockout stages of these 3 tournaments that they won. With that, along with the trophies, Spain would barely lose due to their rock-solid defense, even having a 35-game undefeated streak during this golden period of theirs, before the United States knocked them out of the Confederations Cup in surprising fashion. Now they did lose the 2013 Confederations Cup final in a very convincing way, with Neymar leading Brazil to a dominant 3-0 win, absolutely destroying Spain's tiki-taka style. The first time this really happened, and this kind of opened the blueprint on how to defeat this once seemingly unbreakable Spain national team. But that's only in hindsight, because heading into the 2014 World Cup, Spain were still one of the favorites to lift the World Cup, meaning a lot of football pundits in the space thought that they could go back-to-back at winning the tournament. But they couldn't be more wrong. In the first game against the Netherlands at the 2014 World Cup, the team that they beat in the 2010 World Cup final to win the tournament, it seemed like Spain were going to win again, with them dominating possession due to their tiki-taka tactical approach, and them scoring first thanks to a penalty from Xabi Alonso in the 27th minute. But when Netherlands dominated the shots and the shots on target, they were eventually going to score some goals, which they did. They scored a lot, in fact. Right before halftime in the 44th minute, Robin van Persie would make a run and receive a high ball from deep, and he would score the iconic Flying Dutchman diving header goal against the Spanish to bring back life to the Dutch national team right before the second half. What a goal this was for Van Persie, man. I feel like people forget how good this guy truly was back in the day. Then in the second half in the 53rd minute, Robin's brilliant touch got him past Sergio Ramos and Piqué at the back, and he finished the ball off brilliantly past Casillas to grab the lead for the Netherlands. From here on, it was a bloodbath against Spain. In the 64th minute, Stefan de Vrij would head the ball into the back post to make it 3-1, and then in the 72nd minute, Robin van Persie would get a brace after pouncing on a terrible Casillas touch to make it 4-1. And finally in the 80th minute, Robin would also get a brace after he would dance around Casillas and finish the ball past two Spanish defenders to make it 5-1. And they destroyed the Spain national team in their opening game of the World Cup. This pretty much cemented the fact that Spain were not going to top this group. But if they got a result in the second game, they could stay alive and finish second in the group. However, in order to do this, they had to beat Chile, which they didn't do. Despite dominating on everything on the stat sheet, like the shots on target, the possession, passes, pass accuracy, etc., they couldn't dominate on the scoreboard, in which they scored a big fat 0. While Chile, on the other hand, even though the stats didn't favor them, the scoreline did, with Eduardo Vargas getting on the end of some great Chile attacking and getting past Casillas to score a goal to put Chile up 1-0 early in the 19th minute. Then right at the end of the first half in the 43rd minute, Casillas hit a Chilean free kick straight back into danger, where the ball fell to Charles Aranguiz, and he scored from that rebound to make it 2-0 to Chile. And after that, Spain really had no rebuttal. They were unable to create anything meaningful to score from, and with that losing 2-0 on the day, meaning they lost their first two games of the 2014 World Cup, the previous world champions were knocked out of the 2014 edition of the tournament, thus providing more base to the World Cup curse. In hindsight though, the signs were there. This was an aging Spanish squad with the likes of Iker Casillas, Fernando Torres, Javier Martinez, David Villa, etc. All these players were way past their prime, and the manager Del Bosque even cried out for help beforehand, saying that they needed to change their tiki-taka style before it's too late. Well, it turned out it was too late, and Spain were given one of the greatest and unexpected upsets in World Cup history. But now let's switch the mood up from upsets to Cinderella / underdog stories, and it's only right that we start with the most unexpected story out of the competition first, the deep Costa Rica national team run. After finishing second in the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers for the 2014 World Cup, the Costa Ricans were hoping that the World Cup draw would be favorable to them. However, the footballing gods tried to curse Costa Rica, placing them in a very difficult group, with 11th place team according to FIFA in the world at the time, England, which consisted of players like Wayne Rooney, Frank Lampard, rising sensation Raheem Sterling, Steven Gerrard, Daniel Sturridge, etc. Then there was also the 6th place team in the world, Uruguay, consisting of Cavani, Luis Suarez, etc., and 9th place team Italy, consisting of Andrea Pirlo, Mario Balotelli, Buffon, Verratti, Chiellini, Bonucci, etc. And all these three teams were former world champions and one of the better national teams in their respective regions. So with that, Costa Rica was pretty hard done by in this draw, with a lot of pundits easily claiming that these guys would finish last place in their group for sure. To be fair, it wasn't looking good for Costa Rica initially.
It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
But Costa Rica has a surprise for everybody. They have some talented players that the footballing world was yet to discover, like Keylor Navas, the greatest North American goalkeeper of all time, and a Real Madrid goalie that won numerous Champions Leagues and other trophies with the club, or the captain Brian Ruiz, who's essential to how Costa Rica played at the tournament. And of course, how could we forget about Joel Campbell, the young rising star at the time who got signed to Arsenal as well. Everybody was expecting big things out of him after this tournament. And with players like these and many more, dare I say that Costa Rica had one of the greatest Cinderella stories that the World Cup has ever seen, only adding more fuel to the fire on why the 2014 World Cup might be one of the best ever and one of the most iconic editions of the tournament as well. To start things off, Costa Rica had to play the highest ranked nation in the group, Uruguay, first, and the Costa Rican national team manager at the time, Jorge Pinto, set up his team in a 5-4-1 formation to combat Uruguay's 4-4-2 formation, and has wingbacks fly high up the pitch to expose the space behind Uruguay's midfielders and help out Brian Ruiz and Joel Campbell on the attack. However, the game did not start off the best for Costa Rica, with them giving up a penalty in the 24th minute, in which Edison Cavani easily buried to bring an early 1-0 lead to the Uruguayans. The Uruguay were definitely the better side in the first half, with them having the better chances even after the goal, but Costa Rica managed to stay strong and keep it only to a 1-goal deficit, and they themselves would bounce back in the second half, because in the 54th minute, the rising star Joel Campbell blasted the ball from a volley with his left foot inside the box to bring the game to a 1-1 stalemate. But then 3 minutes later in the 57th minute, Oscar Duarte would head the ball at the back post and score to bring Costa Rica an unexpected and rare 2-1 lead. And following that in the 84th minute, Marco Arena would run past the Uruguay defense and slip the ball past Muslera to secure a dramatic 3-1 victory over Uruguay to start off their 2014 World Cup campaign with a win to everybody's surprise. But at the time, a lot of football fans thought that Costa Rica's win was just a one-off, and that it was a fluke, with Luis Suarez not participating in the opening match due to him recovering from an injury. So when it came time for Costa Rica to play Italy in the next game, the streets were still expecting Costa Rica to lose. But the streets were wrong, because not only did Costa Rica have more shots on target with an even number of shots compared to Italy, but they won out on the most important category, which was the scoreline, with Brian Ruiz scoring a header at the back post in the 44th minute to score the lone goal of the game, pulling off another miracle upset for Costa Rica as they went on to beat Italy 1-0 and guaranteed themselves a spot in the round 16. This was truly a miracle, and the Costa Ricans had a right to celebrate, but the job wasn't over yet.
Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so.
Because if they wanted to top the group, they had to get a result against England in the final group stage game, which they did. I'll just get straight to the chase. England were not clinical enough, with them only having one shot on target, despite having double of Costa Rica's shots, and the game ended 0-0. So with Costa Rica managing to unexpectedly grab a total of 7 points, they topped the group with the world champions Uruguay, Italy, and England being inside it. That is crazy. But the story of Costa Rica's miracle run doesn't end here, because due to them topping the group, they lucked out by not having to play Colombia in the other group, and instead they got to play the weaker side respectfully in that group, Greece. Now Greece was not an easy team to beat. They were resilient and even had the talented Samaras up top. And to be honest, Greece throughout the entire match were the better team on the stat sheet and on the pitch. They won out on every single important category, including the shots, shots on target, and possession. However, Costa Rica were clinical with their one shot on target, because in the 52nd minute, Brian Ruiz hits the ball accurately into the bottom right hand corner at the edge of the box to give the unexpected 1-0 lead to his nation. But sadly, Oscar Duarte slide tackled the Greek attacker in the 66th minute, and this got him a second yellow card, which meant that he was sent off and Costa Rica were down to 10 men. And even though Costa Rica were close to holding on to this narrow 1-0 lead in normal time, Socrates P in the 9+1 minute gets on the scoreboard from an initial novice save and scores to level the tie for the Greeks near the end of the game. This would break the heart of the Costa Rican fans as the game had to go into extra time, where Keylor Navas would make ridiculous saves one after the other, and eventually the match would go into a penalty shootout. In penalties though, Costa Rica were flawless, scoring their first 4 penalties, while Getgas from Greece stepped up and had his penalty saved by Navas in the shootout. And Michael Umania, who was taking Costa Rica's 5th penalty, hits the top bins and sends Costa Rica to the quarterfinals of the World Cup, the first time they have ever gone that far in World Cup history, pulling off upsets against national teams historically better than them. Costa Rica had a ridiculous run so far, man, but sadly it came to an eventual end, with Costa Rica facing the talented Netherlands in the quarterfinals, after they controversially got through with Robin potentially flopping for a last-minute penalty against Mexico, where the iconic saying "no error penal" pretty much came from. And although Costa Rica managed to take the Dutch all the way to a penalty shootout, Tim Krul's substitution for Silson would pay off for the Netherlands, with the penalty goalkeeping experts saving Brian Ruiz's penalty, and then saved Umania's penalty, the man who scored the winning penalty against Greece, to break the heart of the Costa Ricans and to send the Dutch through to the semifinals of the World Cup. So although the Costa Rican dream run ended here, the streets will never forget this fairy tale World Cup campaign from Costa Rica, as they impressed every football fan around the world. But now it's time to talk about another solid miracle/underdog story at the World Cup. And maybe it is a bit biased for me to talk about them because it is my national team, but I want to go over the United States at the 2014 World Cup. Heading into this 2014 edition of the tournament, USA were coming in hot with them topping the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying group. However, just like Costa Rica, the United States were drawn into a very difficult group with the later World Cup champions Germany, a prime Cristiano Ronaldo-led Portugal, and the country that knocked out the US in the previous 2010 World Cup, Ghana. These three were in the group, and this is why this was named the group of death for many people at the World Cup, and especially to us American fans. There weren't too many people out there that were thinking that the US could make it out of this group alive. And what came even more as a surprise was that the manager at the time, Jurgen Klinsmann, left out a key player from the 2010 World Cup. You know, the man that scored the last minute goal against Algeria to help us top the group in 2010, Landon Donovan? Yeah, Klinsmann left him out of the 2014 World Cup squad because he believed other players were performing better and were more deserving of a spot. And also the fact that Donovan took a sabbatical from the national team, which meant that he didn't participate for a lot of the qualifying games. This was really controversial at the time, leaving debatably the greatest American soccer player to some at home. This was a ballsy move, but luckily in hindsight, it paid off, with the other American GOAT, my personal GOAT after Pulisic, Clint Dempsey, clutching up for the States in Brazil. Now the first game of the tournament for the US was against Ghana, our nemesis that has knocked us out 2 times before, but this time it started off great for the Americans. Literally in the first minute of the game, 34 seconds to be exact, Clint Dempsey easily glides by a Ghanaian defender and strikes the ball with his weak foot off the post to give the United States an early 1-0 lead in this match. I genuinely remember when this goal went in, I was running around the house screaming. It was a good thing that my parents weren't home at the time, or else I definitely would have gotten a spanking. However, after that, Ghana would get a majority of the chances in the first and also the second half of the game. After all, they did have more of the possession and the shots, literally almost triple the amount of shots compared to what we, the USA, had. However, it did seem like Ghana would break our hearts in the World Cup for the 3rd time in a row, first in 2006, then in 2010, and now 2014, with Andre Ayew getting free in the box and scoring past Tim Howard to score a late 82nd minute equalizer to potentially secure a point for the Ghanaians. But then, 4 minutes later, one of the most unforgettable and iconic moments happened in World Cup history for the United States, because from a corner kick, John Brooks gets free in the box in the 86th minute and heads the ball in to score a late winner for the US to start their World Cup 2014 campaign with a 2-1 win. This goal was heard all across the country, with fans in every state in America celebrating this legendary Brooks goal. I'll never forget it. This moment was goated, but want to know what's even more goated? That game against Portugal on the very next match day. Now Portugal on paper were obviously the better national team. I mean, it's Portugal, they literally had Cristiano Ronaldo, and even on the stat sheet they were better too, with them having the more shots on target, and the possession, etc. But the USA back in 2014 were straight dogs, and they wouldn't let this phase them. Even when in the 5th minute, Nani scored a very early goal to bring Portugal a 1-0 lead, and the US were playing a goal down for a majority of the game. But then in the 64th minute, one of the best goals in American World Cup history happened. After the US continuously knocking on the door in the second half for an equalizer, Jermaine Jones collected the ball outside the box from a rebound and then smashed it in brilliantly to level up the game 1-1. What a goal this was, bruh. It was a banger, but it gets even better, because in the 81st minute, Captain America himself, Clint Dempsey, would keep himself onside from a yelling cross and chested the ball in to bring a rare 2-1 lead. And I and many other American fans thought that we were going to beat Portugal and secure a historic 2-1 win against them at the World Cup. However, Cristiano Ronaldo crossed in a beautiful ball in the injury time to Varela, who scored in the 9+5 minute to rescue a point in a 2-2 draw. But regardless, this game was amazing to watch as a USA fan, and I'll never forget it. And although the US lost 1-0 to Germany in the last game, Portugal's early 4-0 defeat to Germany on the first match day set back their goal difference by a lot. And in return, it meant that the US would be finishing second in the group of death and making it out alive into the knockout stages due to goal difference, since we tied on 4 points with Portugal, and this meant that we had to face the start of this quote-unquote Belgium golden generation in the round of 16. Now I'm not gonna lie, we were getting cooked all game. Look at these stats, man. We might have had the more possession, but Belgium had 39 shots against us, with 17 of them being on target. But guess what? Tim Howard was on fire in this game, and he made a historic 16 saves in just this knockout stage game against Belgium alone, the most saves any goalkeeper has made in a knockout stage game at the World Cup. And this earned Tim Howard the nickname Secretary of Defense. The streets will never forget this legendary Tim Howard performance. However, even though Tim Howard is doing everything to keep us in the game, and the fact that Wanilowski missed an absolute sitter at the end of normal time to give us a potential late win, the deadlock broke in extra time against us, with Kevin De Bruyne scoring in the 93rd minute to give Belgium a 1-0 lead, and then Lukaku scoring in the 105th minute to make it 2-0. And although Julian Green ended up bringing one back in the 107th minute to bring back hope for us Americans that we can go through, nothing came afterwards, and the United States would get knocked out in the round of 16 by Belgium 2-1. However, football fans like myself will never forget this amazing 2014 World Cup performance by the USA, because making it out of the group of death was amazing enough, but to last that long against this Belgium golden generation in the round of 16 was a cherry on top to an impressive 2014 World Cup campaign, only providing more reason on why the 2014 World Cup can never be forgotten. But now I think it's time to talk about the greatest footballer to ever live in the eyes of many, Lionel Messi, and his devastating setback at the 2014 World Cup with Argentina. You see, Messi was in the prime age of 27 at the World Cup, and after having underwhelming 2006 and 2010 World Cup performances, he was expected to put on a show and carry the two-time world champions to make it 3 at the 2014 World Cup in the country ground of their nemesis of football, Brazil. And initially, it did seem like this could be the case. After all, Argentina's group stage performance went flawlessly. In the first game against debutants in the competition, Bosnia and Herzegovina, it started off on the strong foot in the 3rd minute, with Kolasinac scoring an own goal to give the Argentinians an early 1-0 lead. Then in the 65th minute, Messi started dictating the play at the center of the pitch and started pulling the strings. And eventually at the edge of the box, he got 2 Bosnian defenders to trip over each other, and he slammed the ball off the left post to get the ball into the net to bring a 2-0 lead for Argentina at the World Cup. It was an insane goal for Lionel Messi. It was an absolute peach of a shot. And even though Ibisevic scored a goal late for Bosnia in the 84th minute, it didn't matter, because Argentina would win 2-1 and start the World Cup campaign with 3 points. The next game against Iran was a little bit more tricky though, because despite having the more shots on the target, the more possession, quadrupled the amount of passes basically, and a 90% pass accuracy, Argentina were struggling to put the ball into the back of the net against this resilient Iranian side. But the magic of Lionel Messi was stepping at the end, because in the 90+ first minute, Messi scored an absolute screamer from outside the box to secure all 3 points in a dramatic 1-0 win for Argentina against Iran. What an outrageous strike from Messi, man. That's why he's the GOAT. That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! Then in the last group stage game against Nigeria, Messi had to have another masterclass to make sure Argentina collected all 3 points. First, in the 3rd minute, Lionel Messi got on the end of a rebounded shot from Di Maria, which got deflected off the post, and he slammed the ball onto the roof of the net to give Argentina an early 1-0 lead. Not so fast though, because 1 minute later in the 4th minute, Ahmed Musa would tie the game up for Nigeria to make it 1-1 thanks to his fire goal. Moving on to added time in the first half though, Messi would score from far out from a free kick to bag a brace in the first half and restored the Argentinian lead in this game. But right when the second half kicked off, Ahmed Musa would once again score, this time in the 47th minute, to equalize the game again for Nigeria. But Marcus Rojo would come clutch in the 50th minute from a corner kick to secure all 3 points in a 3-2 win for Argentina. He would be the one who would also clutch up at the 2018 World Cup against Nigeria too, in a must-win game for Argentina. What a coincidence that is, huh? Anyways, with Argentina winning 3 out of the 3 group stage games, they would qualify to the round of 16 against Switzerland. And although Argentina would win 1-0 thanks to a last-minute Di Maria goal in extra time, in which Messi laid it off so he got an assist, Argentina as a whole would low-key scrape their way to the final. And Messi failed to score a singular knockout stage goal after starting off the tournament hot. In the quarterfinals, it was only due to an early Higuain goal that they got past Belgium. Then in the semifinals, Argentina only won on penalties to make the final, etc. So when it came time for the World Cup final against Germany, it came to nobody's surprise that Argentina weren't performing at their best, and even though they did score an offside goal from Higuain, Germany would have some of the better chances. And in extra time, when Mario Götze came off the bench and scored the winner for Germany, Messi would fail to show up, and his last minute free kick that he skied would symbolize his knockout stage performances. And although Messi would end up winning the Player of the Tournament award, that's not the trophy he wanted. He wanted the World Cup trophy, which he failed to get. Unlike the Argentinian icon, he's always compared to Diego Maradona. And after this failure and the other failures, like not winning the 2015 Copa America or the 2016 Copa America, despite going to the final, even quitting the national team before rejoining, etc., it seemed like the 2014 World Cup would be the one that got away. However, at the 2022 World Cup, Messi would be much older and much better for Argentina, as he would perform amazingly throughout the entire competition, finally scoring a knockout stage goal at the World Cup, something Cristiano Ronaldo still hasn't done. Keep in mind, this video was made before the 2026 World Cup, just in case he scores one then. And Messi even scored a brace in the World Cup final against against France, this time actually showing up in the final compared to the time beforehand. And he ended up winning the World Cup just like the old Argentinian legend Diego Maradona once did. Due to Messi finally winning the World Cup, I feel like Argentinian and football fans overall can look back to the 2014 World Cup in brighter light, as this was the start of the character building arc, and him bouncing back to win the World Cup after losing in the final is something that not many have done before, and it just makes the 2022 World Cup victory just so much sweeter. And due to that is why I think Messi losing the 2014 World Cup makes this tournament even more iconic, especially after winning it 8 years later. But let's keep it real, Germany definitely deserved the 2014 World Cup. They were the much better team throughout the entire tournament. Overall though, these are my own personal reasons on why the 2014 World Cup will never be forgotten and will always be so iconic. What are your guys' thoughts on the 2014 World Cup though? Is it your favorite one? Did you think it was overrated? Were you too young to even remember this tournament? I know I'm uncompared to some of y'all, but let me know in the comments what you guys think of it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe. I really appreciate it. And please be sure to follow my Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and join the Discord community. All the links are in my YouTube description. And last but not least, if you want to learn about what happened to every player in the Morocco 2022 World Cup squad that made the semifinals of the World Cup, you definitely want to check out this video right here. You won't regret it.